Welcome to the Grounds for Success podcast. I'm your host, Austin Seltzer. Together, we'll unveil the keys to success in the music industry. Join me as I explore my guests' life stories and experiences to uncover practical insights to help you align with your goals more effectively. Dude, I'm so glad to have you on here. And
thanks for doing this on what I would imagine would probably be a day off for you normally.
Then
really means a lot for you to make time and do it anyway.
No, it means a lot that you would do this. You're here for only a couple days and you have, I'm guessing, a slam-packed schedule, but you made some time to come by and have some coffee with me.
It's, yes, coffee, really awesome people, and really nerdy conversations. I mean, you kind of got me there.
Yeah, I definitely...
That was an easy one. That was an easy yes.
I'm an easy yes on a nerdy conversation.
Love. Here we are. How many episodes have you done so far?
This will be 16 that I filmed.
Okay.
But I think we have 6 out right now.
Great.
Yeah.
So 16 so far total.
Yeah, it filmed. Yeah, so it's a relatively new podcast, and we've already had so many awesome guests.
What's the biggest thing you've learned so far after doing 16? That's a pretty stout number for a new thing.
Yeah, I would say the thing that I've learned above all is that almost every single person, when they have reached success, like we're talking about, you could ask like 20 people what success is, and they would say that this person's successful, that every single one of them only cares to be happy now.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness is the biggest success.
Yeah.
It's like whenever you have reached X level, you just want to be happy. And I thought that was so fascinating, that it's no longer about money or fame or this or that. It's really just about like getting to choose things that make them more happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah. I've also seen that.
Yeah?
Happiness, sustainability. Yeah.
Yes, here we are.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. What brings you to town?
Taping, can't say what, but taping something. Yeah, I think that's all I can say. I'm taping something.
I love that. Oh, you're taping a podcast. Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. I'm taping this. This is what brings me to town.
Yeah, we can't really talk about it, but
yeah.
I love that. So I think you were just on a tour, or you at least played a show, I think yesterday or the day before, right?
2 days ago, yeah.
Okay. So was this part of a tour that you were on?
No, these are sort of one-offs for the summer. I did my first tour, the Red Sky tour, in support of the Red Sky album, which came out in April. Shameless plug. I did that in May. It was my first tour in 4 years. It was the most demanding tour I think I've ever done, especially after being removed from touring and unconditioned after 4 years of just kind of working in the studio at home. So it was life-giving, man. Like I could talk about that tour for like a whole hour in and of itself, just because there were so many breakthroughs for me personally, professionally, performance-wise. Those are my 3 Ps. I like threes, and those are my 3 Ps. But it really was so life-giving. I was so burnt and so drained beforehand, because I had, from the time that lockdown was announced to this tour, there was very little time that I gave myself off. I ran right into work. I just locked myself in my home, which is a studio, and just got to work and just saw it as, okay, if I'm forced to be away from the thing that I love, which is playing live, then I need to make the best of the time that I'm given. So I'm going to work. I'm going to work on this album while no one's watching, while no one's paying attention, and accomplish a lot of things that I knew I needed to accomplish, and make the best with what I've been given. A lot of people did that, right, during the COVID lockdown. So This was kind of my first, and right before the tour, man, I had hit so many walls just like energetically, that the tour really felt like I had come back to life. So I took, for the first time in my entire life, took a month off after the tour.
Bravo.
And it wasn't really necessarily like a month off. It was just, I finally gave myself space to do the things that I never give myself space to do, like human shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so rewarding and so eye-opening, and I learned so much, and then kinda jumping back into the work, making music, the thing that I love the most. It gave me so many sort of like little tidbits of valuable information to put into practice moving forward. So all that to say, finished a tour in May. Really looking forward to another tour soon. Um, but you got to understand, like I'm a Nashville kind of kid, and what I mean by that is Nashville tours on the weekend. We bus call on Wednesday
Right.
night. We do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and or a Sunday every now and then. Most of the time, you're back on Sunday. Doesn't matter what genre. Like you just that's the infrastructure. Also because buses used to cost a fifth of what they cost right now, so you could
Mhm.
afford to do that. And so my touring was all year. My preference is I tour all year. February through November, we're out every weekend doing at least 2 shows. Whereas this was a month, we did 22 shows in 31 days. That's foreign to me. That's not normal.
Yeah.
So this was a lot of things that I wasn't sort of ready for slash expecting, and it was really great to experience it. All that said, it was very quick. It flashed by very quickly. So I think it's taken a couple of months for me to sort of like, forgive me for using the term unpack, but unpack it and process it.
I do like the pun there, and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that I can understand how after 4 years, if that's the thing that really gives you life, being
Mm.
on the road, you had to be for 4 years just yearning for that, and I I'm sure that that was such a nice payoff, but it does bring up this idea, in my head that if you spent 4 years making music, I know that you're a multi-instrumentalist, like, you play a lot of instruments, but do you also engineer and produce a lot of what you work on?
I did. I do. I worked with a lot of great producers, but the way that I work with them is different per person. And I think on this process I learned so much about ownership and what parts of the process really matter to me and what parts I need to take ownership and drive and what parts I need collaboration. Where's the healthiest place for me to look for and get collaboration? And I got to understand my relationship with validation in the collaboration. I realized what collaborations were specifically seeking validation and what collaborations were so empowering that I felt like I was, in charge and I felt like I was driving the car. And it's not an egotistical place for me at all. There is a significant lesson to be learned in trusting your gut, especially in the chapter that I'm in. And I learned it the hard way, I think, in a couple of cases. Tried a lot of stuff that didn't work and tried a lot of stuff that felt really natural and still was craving validation because it was a lot of stuff I'd never done before. So, sort of coming to understand a lot of that, but I did a lot of the production. A lot. I'm going to say a lot because I'm thinking right now of like my co-producer Ruslan. I was able to come in with these crazy stacked you know sessions, and he was able to help me get the picture out of what we had what was on tape. I guess I
Mhm.
love referring to production in the same way that you think of directors. Like all of it matters, but what do we need to pay attention to? What's the scene we're painting? Who's the main actor? All those things. What's the story we're
Absolutely.
telling, etc. So I love looking at it that way, and I think Ruslan. When I think of Ruslan, I think of real collaboration. Um, and there was just a lot of time with me. Every song had like anywhere from 3 to 7 different versions of itself.
Wow.
And then I ended up doing a lot of I worked with some incredible mixing engineers, and I also ended up mixing some of it myself, which was a weird, like, I am not qualified to do this at all. And yet I'm the only one who can hear what I'm hearing, and I can't get it. I can't explain it enough to get what I'm looking for. So fuck it, I gotta figure it out.
Absolutely. I mean, that totally makes sense, especially if you've lived with this baby for 4 years. I mean, it's something so close to you. You put so much time. Why, if there's a couple nuances that you can't get across, why wouldn't you just take it to the finish line?
Yeah.
I mean, I totally understand that. To finish off like this chapter of your life, and we're gonna go all the way back, and then we'll come back to this point. But it sounds like you have some new music coming up. I'd love to know a little bit about what makes this next track special to you, and what's What's going on right now so that we can go back to the beginning and figure out how we got here?
Hmm. So this album, Red Sky, started as an evil twin to my last album, which was called Wild Blue. Wild Blue was the first album that I decided to make. I was at a major label, and it was the first time that I decided, you know what, I'm going to make whatever I want with the assumption that no one will ever hear it. Hoping someone will, right? Hoping it'll all get released. But at the same time, the process that I had before was very much vote by committee, 18 people in a room, Excel sheets, what songs make the album. I wrote 100 songs per album minimum,
Oh my
and
gosh.
that's how that got done. And so that became a very start-stop process, and it was very discouraging for me, and it led me to a lot of misconceptions about myself and a lot of just sort of like conditioning that like not to trust myself. And so Wild Blue was a chance for me to say, I'm going to make whatever I want. And it's okay if no one hears it. I'm proud of it, which is where the tattoo on my arm, it's a paper airplane. Like the concept of the paper airplane was you make the best thing you can, you pour your heart into it, you put it all on paper in this particular picture, and you throw it and you let it catch the wind and it'll find who it needs to find.
Yeah.
It's the separation between art and commerce because I really needed that. And so I made Wild Blue, and I was just really proud of it. And there's a lot of things on that record that I'd never done before, and I had a fucking blast. And there's a lot of stuff that I think if people heard it, they'd be considering what they may or may not. I don't know what where the fuck anybody's heard my music at this point, but because it's all over the place. Like I get people anyway. So Wild Blue was me experimenting, and there was this sort of like alt rock thing that was born because I am really influenced by a lot of different genres. And at that time I was really going through like some of the most played albums were, anywhere from U2 to 21 Pilots to Foo Fighters, things like that. So I was really I was really experiencing the connection with songs that tap into the angst that I was feeling at that time.
Yeah.
With the sort of struggles I was learning about. And
The struggles leaving a major and going on your own path, or
just the struggles of being an artist and trying to just writing 100 songs and just getting told no 100 times. It's like, okay, well at some point you got to shut up and trust that, with all due respect, right? I love the people. I think what I learned in that process was how important it is for me as an artist. There's going to be times where I have to be the one that stands up in the room and says, listen, I know that I'm the least experienced person in this room. I'm also the person who shook hands with my fans. I've given them hugs. We've talked. I've looked them in the eye. They've told me stories about the songs that they connect with. All of you guys got to trust me on this.
Also, they just connect with you.
And trusting that. That's a great point. I'm so appreciative that you said that. Because I think a lot of artists need to hear that more often.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you saying that.
You are the person at the end of the day that they resonate with.
Yeah.
So
Red Sky was a concept where I was like, okay, I'm going to put all my angsty stuff here. And I wrote a bunch of stuff. Wallflower was one of the first songs that's on Red Sky. But Red Sky is essentially 3 different albums because I wrote Red Sky and then I realized there was this whole other thing that started happening when the more doors you open as you create, the more you learn about yourself and the more excited you get, the more you play it for friends. They're like, oh my God, where's this been? So, there were like 3 different albums that I was working on. I love working ahead because like it's all different. The writing process is completely isolated from the production process, is completely, honestly, I think there's a middle ground, right? There's like the writing, there's the splatter paint, and then there's like okay, what's going to make it to the movie part.
Absolutely.
And they're all different seasons for me. And, writing in the middle, also just the writing and the splattering paint require so much safety that I love working on albums way ahead of time because in my mind, it's the same thing as Wild Blue. No one has to hear it. There's no pressure. No one's waiting for it. No one's judging it right now. But even in doing so, I think a lot of my team really encouraged me to combine all the things that I was working on into Red Sky with the sort of explanation of, well, if you really want fans to understand, we have a great opportunity to show fans all of your personalities as a music maker. And, worth considering what it would look like to have a project with a little bit of all of that.
Mhm.
Um, and it took me a second to kind of sink into and understand it because I like categorizing things, and then it became this sort of like 3-act album that goes from familiar to fresh to um, sort of like uh, adventurous,
So
and
cool.
so the next phase is there were over 50 songs written for those 3 projects, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that got left behind, and there's a couple songs that the fans have heard and, by the grace of God, care enough about to fight for. And so we're now at the phase where I want to put the song out called Roses, which is like my sad single anthem. And it's like I think it's the most. I'm not gonna say it's like the most vulnerable song on the record, but when I sing it, I feel like I'm letting people in on a part of me that's very hard to let people into.
Mhm.
Um, but it feels very honest. Everything I do has that sort of like bar of it has to be like I have to be able to speak to it on a personal level. This is, I think, pushing that even further. And yeah, I think for a while I was like, it has no place on the album. And then I realized, no, it's one of the most important things on the album. So Roses, and it's currently my favorite production too. It's just one of those things that happens we can go into it later. But um, yeah, it's just my sad single anthem for people.
Yeah, that I love that, and if maybe it's not the most vulnerable, but if you feel that vulnerable whenever you're singing it, then it clearly is that vulnerable,
Yeah.
That and I'm sure that people resonate with it that way. So, I think that at this point we should go all the way back because I wanna figure out what your young life was like your childhood, your parents, kind of like how you got to this point, and ultimately, I wanna figure out the stepping stones of how you became so successful because of your name is synonymous with, great music, being a top echelon artist where, I mean, people know you.
Thank God, that's really good to hear.
Yeah. I mean, my girl Cass
Appreciate you
upstairs
saying that.
said her 21st birthday was made so incredibly special at a show of yours, which, I mean, she can't remember a ton of it, but that means she was having a great time. And
Yeah.
so I want to figure out some of the stepping stones to get there so that the viewers, the watchers and the listeners can hopefully take away a couple things and implement them into their life, or a fan just be able to resonate with you deeper. And so let's go all the way back. And can you tell me some about your parents and maybe like your early childhood and kind of what shaped that version of you?
Yeah. So I didn't grow up in a musical family. Um, and randomly, I was an only child. That wasn't random. My grandmother gave me a toy car. So the word is, I have heard this story enough to repeat it. So I do my best, but I don't remember any of this. But apparently, when I was young, I would, watch my babysitter had. I grew up in South Louisiana. Live music everywhere. Lots of Cajun music.
Mhm.
And so singing in French, didn't understand what they were saying, but the music was fun. It's very it's dance friendly, right? And I think it's still the reason that I have to have every 16th note filled in my production because it came from listening to Cajun music. Um, but would just watch these people on TV all day playing music, and I would take things around the house and make them into instruments at my babysitter's house. And so my grandmother decided to give me a toy accordion for my second birthday. And according to my father, like I never put it down. I apparently like started playing along to some stuff on the radio. And he like one morning I was playing along with a song and he like pulled the truck over and was like, play that again. I did, apparently. Um, so I don't know how to read music. I just listen and I learn by ear. And I think I'm really grateful for that was the way that I learned music,
Yeah.
you know?
What a
So
wicked skill. Wait, do you have perfect pitch or just like um perfect recreation? Like you can hear and know exactly what it is.
Perfect pitch. Like I couldn't tell you like how many cents you're off. I could tell you you're sharp or flat
Mhm.
on a note, and I could hum a note, etc. Um, so to that extent, I've been told I have perfect pitch. it's a weird thing to claim. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
It's a weird fucking thing
actually
to
even
say.
asking, I was like,
Yeah.
it's a weird thing to say, but I mean, then, like people like Charlie Puth, like put it out there, and that's like
Yeah,
a thing
which
we're very proud of.
yeah, good. Yeah, good. I am very proud of it too.
Uh,
Anyway,
you should be.
I just haven't made my TikTok series about it. But so, yeah, so very early on, I was learning things, and I just wanted more music in my life. Like I asked for a drum kit, and my parents are saints because they got me a drum kit for my like 5th Christmas, and then I was given a guitar for my 6th birthday, and that just kind of became, I guess I say became, most of the instruments that I have a strong relationship with were gifts at a significant point,
Mm.
right? Birthday, Christmas. One was an Easter. I got my first bass as an Easter present, which I didn't know
Oh,
that was a thing
you
even then.
opened
But
an egg and
yeah,
out popped a
exactly.
vase.
Exactly. It was an Easter basket with a little mini, what has now become ukulele basses, but at the time it was just little like electric bass with these rubber strings.
Whoa,
I loved
I
it.
didn't know that was a thing.
Short scale, sounds like a 50s P bass going through like a flip top.
That's really cool.
Like used it up until I broke one of the rubber strings, and it's impossible to find those specific. It doesn't matter. Fell in love with just like instruments and started. There's so many restaurants that have live music in my hometown, and so we would go out, and my dad would, put me on the side of the stage so that I could like pretend I was playing with the band, and play my little accordion. And one night, one of the guys in the band came to my dad during a break, and he was like, "Does he know any of his songs?" My dad was like, "Yeah, he knows these 3." And so they pull me up, they give me a mic, and I start wailing, whatever French I could make up when I was 3 years old, and then we started doing that more often, just going to different like bands. It's crazy to fucking tell the story, but like going to different like bands at different places, and I would stand side stage, same thing. And so then I started showing up at the same like 2 or 3 bands, performances, restaurants, festivals. And there was this one band that we ended up like kind of traveling with. They would do like a 4-hour set at a restaurant. I would jump in for like my little 15 minutes and do my 3 songs, just have a blast, and then go take a nap.
I love
Miss
it.
those days. But and then when I was 7, I just didn't want to get off stage. So like by the time I was 7, they started booking festivals and corporate functions that wanted Cajun music, very the Mardi Gras theme, all that stuff.
Mhm.
And I was like the front man, the front kid.
At 7,
At 7, yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So like my like obsession with music and just performing, luckily I was able to figure out I really love this
Mm-hmm.
super early on, before it was like, do you want to make it a career? Do you want to write? Do you want to do all this stuff? I found everything very like, there's a lot of ownership, especially because my parents weren't musical, right? And I gotta be fair, I played accordion. My mom decided one year that she was going to take guitar lessons. And granted, she was working like 2, 3 jobs, like almost my entire childhood. She was a teacher and she would do so many other things. So one summer she decided to take guitar lessons, and every night she would come home and she would teach me the chord that she learned in lesson. And so I had all day the next day to learn it and play it and mess around with it and apply it to different songs that I knew, that whatever. And, after those 2 weeks, she just never touched the guitar again, really, and I just kind of kept going. So she
Yeah.
likes to take credit for teaching me guitar, and I have to give her credit for teaching me guitar, even though she's never touched it since. But total credit. So yeah, so then it just kind of was. I just wanted So okay, so then it was studio stuff, right? Start going into the studio when I was like 7, 8. Was obsessed with the studio process.
Wait,
Like
so how did you get invited to the studio?
we saved up. There was a studio, I guess, in a town close to mine. And I had like been in studios and recorded with like other bands and stuff. And I think my mom and dad decided, all right, we should make an album for him. And like I wrote 2 songs that make no sense, and I'm not going to say what the names. I don't want people to Google them. Not that they would, but
So they're actually out.
they're out. They exist in the world.
Well, let's go.
Yeah.
Wait, and you were 7?
Thanks a lot, internet. Yes. Yeah.
Dude, okay,
Yeah.
crazy. I
Was-
don't know a single other 7-year-old that was in the studio recording their own songs. So
Oh, there's that incredible. There's a bunch on TikTok. I don't know if you've seen them lately.
I have.
There's a
Today
ton of
is a
them.
little different. Like that kid
Well, no,
Miles.
honestly, I look at God, I forget what's that kid's name on TikTok. I look at
Miles,
Miles and I'm
dude.
like, man, we would have been best friends at that age because like that was me. Like I just like love. I'm not comparing myself by any means. He's insanely talented,
Incredibly.
but his spirit and his love for his seemingly his love for what he's doing reminds me a lot of just like my obsession. Like as soon as I left the studio, I wanted, the first time I found out there was a thing called an inbox, and you could buy a Pro Tools rig for $500. I was a wedding videographer in middle school, paying for my Pro Tools rig. Like I gotta have it.
Dude, what a hustler.
It was so much fun, man. I love that little thing, and then it moved on to the M Audio. Like, so what I'm saying is, I when I fell in love with the studio and the process, I got a little 7-track Tascam for Christmas, and I never left my room. So then the circle was complete because I could create, I could record, and then I could go play it, and then I could create and record and play. So that became like, okay, this is my life's work. This is my purpose. This is what I want to do. This is all I want to do. And
what year
still
did
that
you
way.
find, or did you get the Tascam? Because this is like this year set the course of the rest of your life. How old were you?
I'm trying to remember. I want to say I was like 10 or 11, maybe 11, 12.
11, recording your own tracks, and you knew for the rest of your life you wanted
Playing
to be in
keyboard
music?
drums too, man. Didn't know how to mic them up,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
loved it.
that's incredible. It's hard for me to believe in luck. I know that there's a lot of people that believe in luck, and sometimes I flirt with the idea of it. Um, I don't know how to explain that you, from that young of an age, other than you were subjected to amazing music because you lived in such a great hometown for live music, you just immediately resonated with it. I wouldn't call it luck. I don't know what to call that, but you, from such a young age, already resonated with music.
I don't believe in luck in the like if it's explained as like it just happened. I don't believe it.
Hmm.
I absolutely believe that we put ourselves on paths and we say yes to opportunity. We prepare. Like there's a lot of different ways to explain what some people would explain. I think sometimes people use luck as a way of saying I when what really should be said is, and I have no idea how they got there,
Yeah.
But there's always a backstory, and there's always, even if it's not very well known or very well documented, there's always a backstory. That's my personal belief, not imposing that on anybody, but that's just what I've seen. So yeah, like I think, what was I getting to? A few different thoughts that came up when you said that, but I know that I was well, yeah, I was the people I was most influenced by, whether it was the people I was jamming with or the people that I played with, right? As me as the front kid, um, all had day jobs. This wasn't a life. This was a life for them, not like a living.
Yeah.
This was something that doesn't make any sense. But my point is, like, they would work all day, they would come home, they would load their car, then they would go play music.
Hmm.
And it was even more work than the work they'd put in all day. But they could not live without it. And granted, like it was extra income in an area where, there wasn't a lot of money to be made. So in some cases it was a necessity, but they had found a way to match necessity with their passion and like just fuel this like great energy in a room. And it was also kind of, I felt like it was really rewarding because you see people dancing and you're doing your job. It puts a smile on your face. It makes you feel good, and it gives you the energy, honestly, to wake up the next day and do it again, right? So, that was my understanding. That's my understanding now. I can't say that was my understanding then, but I was really lucky to be around people who did it because they loved it, not because it was their living.
Right.
It wasn't a business. They didn't treat it like a business. They did it because they loved it and that was their passion.
Yeah, that's definitely the area that you grew up in, because you could, if you were out here, it'd be a little bit different.
Yeah,
But there, it was just strictly passion.
yeah, passion.
And yeah, being around that from such a young age, you got your 10,000 hours before you can probably even remember, with people who are just so passionate about this,
Yeah,
that passion rubbed off on you, and for sure
absolutely,
made you want to do this because you saw how happy they were, I'm guessing.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what a
yeah.
beautiful thing.
Passion first. It wasn't a hustle. You know, it wasn't about the first million. It wasn't about, you know what I mean? All those things I think we hear a lot about when we start, or at least when I talk to people who are getting into the industry. You know, there's a lot of those sort of like metrics and those measurements that I was never subjected to
Absolutely.
as a 7-year old,
Yeah,
you know?
for the listeners, I this is another thing that I have found with all the people that I talk to who have made it to a certain point in a music career that, again, like most of the world would say is successful. Every single one of them started in music as a hobby because they loved it
Mhm,
and they just wanted to be a part of whatever it was.
mhm,
The moment they started, it wasn't like one day I'm going to be rich or famous or this or that. It's
mhm,
I can't live without this thing.
mhm.
I love this and I'm just going to do whatever it is
Yeah.
until it gets me to a point. But they don't even think about that point. It's just like I can't live without this.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. I've seen, yeah, a very similar, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So, okay, so if we're 11 now, if we're inching forward, let's not even talk about school life because I bet you didn't give a damn. You were just like itching to be
Was
with music.
dying to get out. Made
Yeah.
friends with a family band that, like, was homeschooled, and I was like, "Please." And my parents were like, "No, we're not pulling you out of school." Nothing against homeschool, but just they were like, "No, you need structure. You need consistency. You need normality because no other part of your life is going to be normal."
Wow. What
You know?
insight. That was
Yeah.
so wise.
Yeah, honestly, looking back.
They already knew that you were going to be something and they were just like in his formative years we need to put some structure here.
Yeah, I don't something's a very
Very vague, huh?
subjective term as to what they thought my future would look like. And not that they didn't believe in me, but um, I think they just didn't know what to expect, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Which makes sense because like if they're not in the industry, it's really hard for anybody to fathom who's not in the industry what that trajectory looks like. And I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out what that is.
yeah, I mean, serious risk of a side tangent here, but to the point of why we're having this conversation, this is one of the industries, many of them exist, and this is one of the best examples of there is no framework. There's no road path, no set the destination in the maps and follow,
Hmm.
you know? I mean, you have to figure it out on your own, you know? So yeah, I'm sure it was terrifying for them, but yeah, I couldn't give a shit about school.
Yeah. I mean, but that
Yeah,
makes sense because you were so passionate about an art and
yeah.
art doesn't have a form. School has a form.
Mhm.
Artists don't really like being put into a form. So that totally makes sense to me. But now let's move forward a little bit. Well, I know that you did, but I don't know what year. I'm guessing not that long after you were discovered. When was the first record deal that you made? Or really, like, what was the first big stepping stone for you after recording some of your own songs?
It was a series of small ones. So, like let's say, I don't know if you'd call it a career between 12 and 18, but like my musical journey, if you will. That's also kind of a pretentious way to put it, but my path was say yes to anything, say yes to everything, show up for everything. Say yes to anything, show up for everything.
Damn.
Let's brand that.
That's
Say yes
great.
to anything, show up for everything. So, but truthfully, that was the spirit. Take every gig, take every opportunity, jump on stage every chance you get. And it's not like to show off. It's I think it's because my parents knew that that's where I got to just be. And like looking back, like there's a lot of therapy around like I was doing and I'm learning how to just be. But at the same time, being on stage is the most like in my spirit I feel. And so I think it was just kind of an obvious, like subconscious decision of any chance he gets to be in a place where he can just be free and do what he does.
Yeah.
Like let's try to give him that opportunity. So we chased a bunch of stuff and we said yes to everybody and played every gig we could and so it was a series of you could go back. I mean, you could go back so far, but like there's a guitar player that was part of a band that was signed in Nashville, knew some record executives. He got a demo from me. He got 4 demos from me because I wanted him to play in my band for some shows. He called my dad. He said, "Listen, I really want to send this to the executive that I know. He's got to hear this." My dad was like, "Sure, send it." At the same time, or like kind of simultaneously, um, I had music on MySpace, and I had a message from Cindy Foreman at Universal Music Group Publishing, who said, "Is it true that you're writing all of these songs yourself? And is it true that you're playing all these songs yourself? I'd love to meet with you." I thought it was fake. Never responded. 1 month later, she sent me another message on MySpace, and we took it seriously. And then the next trip, we were taking like routine trips to Nashville, like once every month, every other month for like a weekend, and just meeting with anybody we could. So all these things started kind of converging and oh, by the way, and my publisher found me via a video that popped up on YouTube of me, like this video at the time, like right at the beginning of YouTube, had like I think 11 million whatever plays of me playing with Hank Williams Jr. when I was 5 years old. So like all the
5?
saying yes, right? Still catching up, right? I was 12, 14 now, 16, 14, 14, 16, whatever. 16. And that's when she messaged me. And at the same time, my guitar player buddy, Tony Ardway, was giving my music to a music executive and saying, "You got to hear this." And so then the music executive calls, and we starting conversation. And then I found an attorney, and the attorney kind of became like my Music Row dad or uncle, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And for those listening and watching, Music Row
Yeah.
really relates to a street that has all of the publishers in Nashville on it. And I mean, you can tell a little bit more if you want about that, but I'm guessing some listeners don't know Music Row.
Most succinct way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like, sorry. Yeah. So it's common. It's like a really often tossed around term in Nashville for like the street that the industry used to primarily exist on.
Yeah.
You could literally walk door to door and just go into these houses that were also labels, whether they be majors or independents. Like that's kind of Music Row was the origin of a lot of the Nashville music industry. Not so much anymore, but
Berry Hill seems to...
Berry Hill, also East Nashville.
Nashville, yeah.
There's a ton of stuff happen. Like it's kind of all over. There's a ton of stuff in Germantown and like the Nations. There's a ton of areas that are really popping off music industry wise. So it all kind of, again, just like multiple sort of steps kind of came out of nowhere. So you just kind of keep like saying yes and taking, meetings and playing for people. And my first offer was from Universal. I had moved to Nashville. Mom and Dad and I were all looking for houses in Nashville. And it was really tough for my parents to leave their job. My mom's a school teacher. My dad had a really consistent job. So I was 14, 15 at the time. And we decided, okay, we've got to move to Nashville. It was when I was a junior in high school that we went to Nashville. I had the publishing offer in hand, and I think that was kind of like my parents' way of saying, okay, there is a path.
Mm-hmm.
That is the first step on what we can recognize as a structured path.
Right.
So now what do we do?
Yeah, there's a tangible thing that we can actually like see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And feel. So I went to this school, and the guidance counselor presented me with an opportunity to graduate early. If I would write a letter to the superintendent saying, "Hey, I'm going into songwriting," which I did, and got approved. Took an accelerated course over the course of that summer, and then went straight into full-time songwriting. I knew I was writing for myself, right? But that's when it kind of started. And then at the same time, the label started kind of talking, and just started kind of developing the music. And I think that was when I moved to Nashville and sort of planted roots there.
Yeah, that's incredible. I really, really want to highlight for anybody watching and listening to this, just saying yes to as many opportunities that come your way as possible seems to also be an underlying theme, except, and I'm sure that you'll resonate with this, is that if in your gut you feel like this is not a good thing to say yes to, like you will feel whenever something does not feel right. I would definitely say trust your gut and avoid that.
Yeah.
But if you're just like nervous, scared, fearful, say yes.
Mm-hmm.
You just never know who you're going to meet, where that's going to go. And like you said, there's no way that your 5-year-old self knew playing for Hank Williams Jr. was going to lead
To
to
a publishing deal.
right. But I can totally see that because of the music that he plays, and I can see that you would have played with him. I mean, he's playing a lot of Cajun influenced music. I mean, Louisiana style, crazy cool music, and I'm sure that was awesome. But okay, so
Sorry, to your point, because I 100% agree with you. Because yes, that you can say yes to everything, and you have to sort of like help. I like to encourage people who are like just starting to exercise that to trust their gut, right? And it's kind of like if it doesn't feel like an opportunity, if your gut feels not good about fear, nerves are all part of opportunity. There's a different feeling that you get, and it's a gut instinct when something doesn't feel right, and absolutely listen to that.
yeah,
And yeah, yeah. There's a because also there's a I feel in my experience at least that um saying not now is also a valid way to say no
hmm,
because if it's right it'll come back around
oh,
or it'll come from the right person. So it's okay to say, you know what, not now, you
I
know?
actually love that.
Yeah.
That's a great way of doing that. Not now.
Yeah.
It's not a no. It's just a not now.
Yeah.
And maybe it totally is a no, but it's an easier way
It
to
gives
put
you
it
a
down.
chance to sit on the sidelines and watch for a second.
Yeah.
And also if it's not right, it becomes very apparent and as it keeps going, it makes itself known. Or it gives you an opportunity to go back later and say, "Hey, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's go."
That's
I was
actually
yeah,
very wise.
yeah, I don't know, just for what it's worth.
That's great. So tell me some about like whenever you sign your first major deal, like what does the world look like? And I really want people on the other side of this to understand what it looks like from just I guess creating your own music to now you have a whole team. You have those Excel spreadsheets and 18 people in a room. And what how can they see through your lens what that looks like?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of I don't know anything, and these people must know what they're doing, um, that you have to kinda navigate and figure out when to step in and when to listen,
Mhm.
uh, and when to trust yourself. That's all neither here nor there when you're in that when you're in that, like, walking through the record label door for the first time. Um, but it just felt like everything went in it felt like I had been preparing for race day, and then it felt like everybody was getting in the cars, and it was time to get in the car. And, um, you know, when I officially signed, I think I was 18, but it was we also negotiated for a year. I can't tell you how many conversations I had,
Oh my god.
with one specific person who was like, "Dude, you should really just sign, man." And kind of because it was during the whole real estate crash and all that stuff. Like, you should just sign whatever you can. There's 1,000 people moving to Nashville a day, and they're just as talented. And it's like, and all those things are true. But that's not a reason to rush. And that talk about a not now. I had
Absolutely.
to trust the one person who was negotiating on my behalf, saying, "Listen, you're talented enough. Well, we need to make sure you get a deal that's good for you, and if it takes a second, it takes a second." And also, like, I had met with a couple different labels, who, like, didn't get it because I wasn't easily defined as one thing, right? Like, I wasn't easily defined as country. I wasn't easily defined as pop. I wasn't easily defined as anything. So, that took a second, and I had to trust the process, and then it finally kinda came through, and it was actually a surprise. My attorney asked me to go to the, office, and it's so funny looking back because he used the same it's so valid of a reason for me to go to the office and sign papers that it's still a thing that happens every 3 months now. He's like, "Hey, I got some trademark paperwork for you to sign when you come to the when you come to the office." And I remember, like, banging on the door mad in my room because I was like, "Why don't I have a deal yet?" I watched a lot of friends around me, and I was comparing, and I was in this really unhealthy place, and I was like, "Why don't I have a deal?" Which is absurd, and at the same time, like, this is something I'd wanted since I was, 5 years old. So, um, and sure enough, I went to the office and I was signing my record deal. Like, he was like, "We got everything we wanted. We're in a good place, and you're, well protected, and we're in, everybody feels good about this. Not just us, but the label, everybody." It felt good, and I
Yeah.
got to go home and surprise Dad for Father's Day. Like, "Hey, signed it." Um,
Amazing.
so, yeah, so that just felt like race day. Then it was like, okay, what are the songs we have for the album? Do we have the first single? Do we have the second single, third single, etc.? And I just was still writing. I had wanted, which was we all felt like a really powerful. The label really believed in it as like a big single, and of course, this is all hearsay at this point. It's just like, well, okay, well, whatever, we'll see.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember having a conversation with somebody who was like, "Listen, one is going to be the biggest song off the record, but we can't start with that. We got to start with something else." And um, kept writing, and eventually I played Storm Warning, which was my first single, and I played it for my management like before a meeting that we were going in for like wardrobe and styling. Um, and like for me, it was just like it was a perfect combination of like a lot of influences that I love, but I felt like it was too nerdy, musically. I was like, I don't know that this is like the big radio hit you're looking for, and they were like, this is the big radio hit we're looking for, and I was like, well, hot damn, I don't know anything, and so they loved it, and then it was like, okay, we got the first single, we got the second single, let's go, because we also had another song called Somebody's Heartbreak, which we all felt like was a single at some point. We had a song called Love Makes Me. We had a song called Faith. We had a song called Everybody's Got Somebody But Me. And they were all songs we felt like could be singles. We could pivot anytime, etc. Because like in the country, when you talk about a single, like you're talking about 52 weeks
Yeah.
to get a song to number one. It's not a quick process. So by the time, we got a song to number one, it was probably time to move on to the next record, I really wanted 5 singles off the first record. And I will say we did get that. So
That's
rock on.
Yeah.
But
That's huge.
I was really excited. Looking back, I'm really proud of that. But anyway, so it was just like, my manager at the time said, is there a producer that have you looked at producers? Do you know what a producer does? And I was like, Dan Huff.
Yeah, Dan Huff.
Talk about dreaming big and really shooting for the stars. I was like, I want to work with Dan Huff. And so I met with him. He was very gracious, very kind, and very in from the first meeting. He was in a hurry to go to his prayer group, so I didn't get to play my third song for him, but he was like, I'm here. I'd love to sit with you. And so he would come back to the studio that I was working in and just sit and listen, and I would go meet him at his house. I'd play him new stuff. And I gave him a couple different references, for like, he was like, what are you loving right now? What excites you? And let me listen to that and digest it. And I believe it was Viva La Vida. He had made a record with Rascal Flatts called Me and My Gang, which to me, looking back now, kind of felt like a really cool country alternative record.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that record?
I have, yep.
That whole album is really fascinating to study. And like he'd worked on the Keith Urban stuff, like the Golden Hour, I think it was Golden Road. He'd worked on Golden Road, which I thought was one of the greatest. And he had just finished Defying Gravity, which in my opinion is my favorite Keith Urban album ever made. And I gave him, I think, Mercy Me, Coming Up to Breathe, Viva La Vida, and I probably gave him Continuum. So that was kind of our starting of the relationship, and they booked a studio. They wanted me to go in and make the record they wanted to see if we could make an album like I made my demos, which is, me DIY figured out. So it was just Dan and me, and I brought up a bunch of friends from Louisiana that I had worked with that had given me the keys to their studios, that knew how to tweak drums and get sounds or like help me with this and that. So I was kind of surrounded by some friends, and I asked for a place outside of town. So we found this place called The Castle, which is where they had just finished working on Defying Gravity, and it had this insanely gorgeous stone drum room.
Ooh, that's cool.
Oh my God, it's still the best sounding drum room I've ever had the pleasure of working in.
Hell yeah.
And so, and I even got to use some of the drums from Defying Gravity. Chris McHugh was kind of, is still a friend and a really cool mentor, but we had kind of a lot of mutual relationships, and he came by and dropped off a Steve Jordan snare and one of his snares that he had used on Defying. So it was just a dream. We set up at the Castle for 3 months, which is unheard of. But again, it was just me and Dan Huff.
Yeah.
And we worked every day, 5 days a week, every week, nonstop for 3 months at the Castle. And then we moved into Dan's house, and we worked for another 4 months. Same way.
Gosh.
Yeah.
What
so my relationship
labor of love, for
my
sure.
relationship with making an album is it should take at least a year of nonstop work.
With one of the best producers of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of it. And I learned a lot from him in that process. So it was just, we started with 5 songs. The label came 4, and the label came in and listened to kind of the roughs of the first 4, and they were like, okay, this process works. Keep going. Go make 8 more. And so we did.
That's
That was the debut
incredible.
record.
That is I'm sure that people loved hearing that. I did. That's awesome. Dan is incredible. Um I never have met him, and then I assisted on a Keith Urban record, which he definitely produced. Just he's incredible.
hmm
I have seen his guitar whenever he's in the studio. It's just like good, like literally every amp, every guitar, everything. It just comes in, and I know raw. It's just perfect sounding. He's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was an awesome experience. Um, so I know that for those listening, you guys have an awesome dinner tonight, and I want to make sure we get some cool little nuggets in here. So
Yeah.
um, let's go and talk about, for people listening who are artists.
hmm Mm.
I would love for them to know the differences through your eyes, and maybe which one you should go with, depending on your mindset of a major or indie, and kind of your relationship with both.
Man, there are so many. I know this is not helpful. As if for all of you creatives listening, everyone, by the way, is a creative, and I'm specifically thinking of artists. If I were to put myself in your shoes, getting into the business, asking this question, there's a lot of questions, and I just encourage you. One of my favorite things about my co-pilot manager is I think I was always afraid to ask questions. And that is the most powerful thing you can give yourself, is asking questions. If someone thinks that your question is dumb, or if they judge you based on your question, fuck that. You do not need to work with them. They are not an empowering person for you to be around. There's your answer. Don't work with that person.
Yeah.
If you have to, make the best of the relationship, but know that they're not going to add value to you moving forward. They're just there to stay still. You are there to grow. They're whatever. So first off, ask as many questions as you can. The smartest people in the room ask all of the questions. The smartest people in the room know nothing when they walk in the room, and have the mindset of, I know nothing when I walk in the room. That's who I'm really inspired by. And I've tried to implement that. I've tried to teach myself that and be better at asking the questions that I feel like I should probably already know about, because it's also always changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody who I thought knew everything, and I walk away from the conversation and I'm like, they don't know anything either. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I just mean like they're figuring this out in real time, just like I am.
Mm-hmm.
They've just been doing it long enough, and they're more comfortable doing that.
Maybe they know the questions to ask.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe they're just asking questions when I'm not.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I guess I say all that because it massively depends on what you want for the season. This is an oversimplification, and that's what I don't want to like set this as like the standard or the tone, or this is the answer. Resources, right? Like bigger companies have bigger resources. So, if you're talking to a label, if their resources, like they've got a kick-ass A&R department that like secretly helps develop brilliance in you. They see you, they get you, and they're there to go on the ride. Like that's a resource in and of itself. They might not provide all the other resources you think they will, as well as that, but that is valuable. So that's something to measure and weigh. And then there's just financial. Like, are they going to put a lot of money behind making sure that I get in the right rooms with the right people, and give me the opportunity to work with the people who are more expensive, those kind of things. Or marketing department, man, they're completely detached from making the music, but they're really good at marketing it. That's worth it. So I think you kind of have to just like determine what currencies are worth what for you and the season that you're in. Because there'll be some seasons, right? I'm saying this. I'm not saying this as if everyone listening doesn't already understand this and know this, but I do think that, what I've seen is there's some seasons where you're fine. Like you're surrounded by people who you just love working with, and that is all that matters. You're going to make great music, and people are going to connect with it. And it's a slow growth, but it's real growth, right? And there'll be some seasons where you're like, no, I'm ready for the rocket fuel. Let's fucking go. And then it's worth looking for the team. You just and it goes back to, I mean, I've never been like a great business person, but I do think it's just like the simple answer is like the whole like hire to your weakness. I think it's just looking for that. What am I missing? What do I need the most
Yeah.
right now?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
That's I think the only thing that really matters. Always like you'll experience all kinds of versions of success. Again, defining success differently every season. And to me, that's the simplest way to boil it down. What am I missing right now, and how do I get it? Not just money. Like try to anytime money comes up as first, like, well, it'd be great to have a bunch of cash. Of course, yes. And what would it look like if you had all the cash? What would you do first? Who would you hire first? What department would you build if you could build anything? Okay, let's go find a place that has that kind of department and see if you can, if they speak your language and if they get you, those kind of things. Does that answer any of the questions at all?
Absolutely. Such a great answer. I feel like that just educated somebody listening on maybe some questions that they didn't know that they needed to ask.
Mm.
I think that does complete the puzzle a little, because an indie artist who's releasing today, if they're doing really well, like I can think of a couple in my head, they're streaming well and they're self-funded,
Mm-hmm.
they're indie. Maybe you don't need to change what you're doing. Just keep going, unless your idea of where you want to be is just too astronomically different because you need the funds to market it properly. Getting on radio is very impossible, if not impossible, if you're indie. It takes a lot. And
Right.
so if that's like the goal, that's maybe something you need to explore. But if you're really kicking ass and you're able to sell out shows in smaller venues and you love that, maybe don't break what's working.
And again, like I hope none of anything I say sounds pretentious at all. But the conversation I love having with artists when they're like, I really just want that big radio song. I just want to go to radio and have number one. My question is, and what do you want that to become? What do you want out of that?
Mm.
Because I've seen a lot of people who have number ones, and it doesn't automatically lead to hard tickets. And if your passion is, I want to play as many shows a year, which is mine, then you need to start asking the questions either to the team you have or to the team you're trying to build of, okay, if we're going to go and get a number one, how do we turn that into me playing in front of 5,000 people within a year, right? Or maybe you want to go slower. Worth it to consider how fast you want to get there too. Because then you're determining what kind of engagement you want to build with the people who listen to your music. Do you want them to be excited about a song right now and forget about it? Or do you want them to follow along with you and then be excited with you when you do have that big? There's so much to consider. And the only thing that really matters is, what do you want what's the picture? If you could draw the dream picture of where you want to be, what does it look like? Well, I love playing in front of at least, whether, maybe you've played in front of a theater, or maybe you have never played in front of an arena, but you feel like that's like your ultimate goal. Okay, well then we need to build an arena career, which there's a lot more to consider than just, when do we take a song to radio? Do we want it to be number one? You got to consider timing. Like, you got to make sure you're opening for the right people, to make sure that you're not just opening for as many people as possible, but you're singing songs to people who are gonna go back and listen to that song after you leave.
Absolutely.
And like, what is the artist that aligns with your purpose and your values? And all those things are worth considering. So there's so much to consider, and at the end of the day, it really, like, you challenge yourself. The same thing with money, right? The same thing with all the things that seem like the accolades you want. I want to, I think we all want the accolades, the awards and things like that. But what do you want that to mean? What do you want the number one on radio to mean? What do you want that kick-ass opening slot to mean? Well, it means that those people are going to come and see me at a smaller venue in the fall, and they're going to continue to see me because they're, and that's one of the reasons that I really loved country, was because it wasn't about a single or an album. It was about a human, to what you said earlier, which I really appreciate you saying. Those are the questions you need because once you can see it in your head, like, believe in manifesting or not, I'm here to tell you it's a real thing. Like, my screensaver was tour buses. When I moved to Nashville, I went on Google Earth and I found every arena in the country. I Wikipedia'd what the in stage capacity was, and I made my own routing and I built my own arena tour. And I would, in my mind, every night, would you know either practice music or whatever. I can't remember exactly how I did it, but I would look at pictures of those arenas and I would look at tour buses on my screensaver, and I would just, like, if you can build yourself a picture of what brings you joy and what brings you happiness, that'll give you every answer as far as for when people ask you what do you want. It's not just this achievement, but it's going to mean that I get to do this.
Dude,
Yeah.
holy crap. That was just so beautiful, so wise. Damn, thank you for, I mean, the whole podcast was just to get what you just gave. I really hope, and I know there's no way that it won't. Somebody listening, if they could just take away one thing from this podcast, it's that ultimately the only thing that you need to do is figure out where you want to be one day and envision it so deeply. You know exactly what it is, and then figure out the game plan to that point. If you don't know exactly where you want to be, it's very difficult to make the right moves because, like you said, um, early on, I actually think one of the most beautiful and useful things about country radio is how long it takes to get a number one.
Mm,
The 52-week cycle allows a song to be cemented into somebody's mind for a very long time so that it's a part, like a fabric of an entire year of their life before it gets to number one, so that that song really deeply means something to you as opposed to a TikTok hit that's gone in 15 seconds.
it tests the listener's relationship with the material.
Mm,
And the longer it stays, the more it means something to the person listening to it. Yeah, for
absolutely.
sure. I agree with that.
But then you can like manufacture your whole career around, if you want to be playing stadium shows, it's not something that is going to be a pop off on TikTok. It's going to be something that has to be the fabric of somebody's being. Like they relate a moment to something, a song of yours for a long time.
Yeah.
And then you can manufacture a tour that you want to be on that perfectly gets you to that point. You don't go with maybe a viral TikTok person. You go with somebody that has maybe a smaller crowd, but they've been doing this for so long that those fans are deep rooted in that artist. And so because they love that artist, now you're going on tour with them and now they associate you with an artist that they love as opposed to a TikTok hit, which I'm not dissing on. I love TikTok for many things, but it's just a different tool.
It's the same thing as like a radio hit. Like, you can have a massive radio hit and quickly and mishandle it, right? Like,
Right.
the same thing you can do. Like, these are all opportunities. They're all these discovery platforms, and you can misuse it, and it can be a channel as long as you know. Yeah. Again, like, it's what your destination is, and you have to pave it one step at a time.
Yeah, dude, that was the nugget that everybody in the world I think needs who's a creative, not just in music. I think that just goes across all creative fields where you want to be somewhere one day, just setting that intention, that goal. And we talk on this podcast a lot about manifestation. I'm very, very deep into it. I mean, this room was once a vision in my head, and the podcast was for over 5 years. I've wanted a podcast, uh, but I needed to raise my platform, mixing and mastering wise, to where I could reach out to awesome guests, where I can have these cool conversations. And I needed to feel cemented enough with, like financially, where I could dive into something else. So all these things had to happen, but this room, this podcast, this everything was an idea in my head, as was touring and playing arenas for you.
Yeah.
My arena might be a little smaller and, a little different.
Well, that's what you bring up a really interesting and saying smaller. Like I think we're all guilty of saying like of comparison, you know? And
Yeah,
we like say comparison is the thief of joy. That's great. But um your dream is no one else's. And you've got to stay. And that's another thing that having that like really doing the work of focusing on your vision is really valuable because it'll always be the most important thing. And you'll never have to compare it to anybody else's because like, no, these things are more important to me, you know, kind of to your point earlier of like happiness, sustainability, you know, that picture is all that matters. So you can look at somebody else's career and say, I mean, yeah, am I jealous that they're doing this venue right now? Yeah, but like, would I want to have it that quick? And like, because maybe I'm scared of losing that audience if I don't do the exact same thing again. You know, there's so many things to consider when when you, yeah, you just never compare your vision with anybody else's because no one else has the same vision you have. Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah.
Dude, thank you so much for coming here today. I know that you're only in LA for a couple days and somehow you were able
Just
to
here for
carve
this,
out.
man.
This is the filming,
This is
of
the
course.
filming. Yeah, you
Yeah,
got that on film, right?
I think so. We're still rolling. We're still rolling. You
Great.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, dude. Really, the whole podcast coming to that point, that I really think is so monumental for so many people who are asking, "I want to do this, but how do I do it?"
Hmm.
I think the first step is setting that intention and that very vivid image of where you want to be, and then carving out a plan to get there. And that's to hear it from you, the way that you said it, I think was the whole point of this podcast. So thanks for dropping that. And if you want to leave us out on what did you write on the chalkboard?
You can't read my handwriting, can you? Be
Well,
honest.
it
Tell me the
says
truth.
you are the greatest storyteller.
Yeah,
So wrap us up with this.
yeah. I'll say more about this sort of as I continue to tell my own story, but um, there's a lot of really great resources that explain the stories we tell ourselves, right? And that's like, um, this is kind of getting into a therapy conversation, but I believe whatever you believe, you exude, you know? And the story you tell yourself about yourself is the story you're going to tell the world about yourself. And that's with your body language when you walk into a room, your language as you talk about your art. You walk into a party and you're not feeling so great about yourself. That's how you're going to that's how people are going to perceive you. That's the story you're going to tell them about yourself. And I'm not hardline not saying make up a fake story, go be a fake person, go tell people how important you are, go tell people how great you are. I'm saying give yourself the space you need to understand why what you're doing matters to you because it does. You're doing it because it matters. So have your relationship with that. And just know your story. I am a nerd. I am a wallflower that makes music for wallflowers. That's why the song Wallflower is like my favorite song on the album, even though it's kind of a secret track, that we don't talk about a lot. Um, and it changes, right? It changes for me seasonally. Some seasons like I think roses is a version of that. Um, but I really do believe that there's so many people. There's a very close friend that comes to mind that I don't know if it was like conditioning that made them feel like, oh well, you're on a level and I got to get to that level and it's all just levels and it's like no, dude, like you're brilliant. And it doesn't matter how much time you've spent in town. It doesn't matter how much work you've done. It doesn't matter. Because I say a lot, like, I did a lot of things on this record that I wasn't qualified to do, but it doesn't matter if you're qualified. It only matters if you care. Right. And so getting back to my original point, knowing that, for other people to understand, like you have to know well, it's honestly everything we've said. It's know the thing you want, know your purpose and your passion and your purpose and the picture that you want to make for yourself or make with the gifts that you have and the light that you have to bring to the world. And that is your story. So go tell that story and let that be your story. Because everyone is their own best storyteller. You are the only person who can tell your story. So know it and tell it and know that it's true and believe in it and believe in yourself and be good to yourself. and treat yourself like the person in the story that you're telling.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Dude, thank you so much for coming on, and
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for making time on a day off. Really kind of you.
thanks for making time on your 3 days here.
Absolutely.